Hey kids, this is Ivan. How you doing? Every once in a while you find that your life has taken a bit of a left turn, and sometimes maybe not a huge turn. But I've noticed that in the last year or so, I've been kind of branching out, looking at different role-playing game ideas, and trying to see where I'm going to land in terms of like what's floating my boat, what I want to, put my time into. Especially seeing as like anything that I kind of land on, I'm going to have to recruit people and try to do a sell and do a pitch. And I always make it a little bit harder for myself because I tend to gravitate some games that are a little bit odd or different or not mainstream, but such as my cross to bear. But anyhow, it must have been like 5 months ago or so. I did a video response to Red Dice Diaries to John, and he had a video. I think it was like, "What three things do you look for in a role playing game?" And I totally cheated. I think I listed like five or six. And as I've been going around looking at all these various role-playing games, these things that I listed keep on popping up. And so it wasn't my intent necessarily to do a series on these things, but what the heck. So I think I'll call this series Strange Attractors. What attracts me to role-playing games? And this one is definitely about a strange attractor. This is about the premise. Premise to me is very important. Back in 1981, when I was 13 years old, you know, that was when I got exposed to or first got Dungeons and Dragons. I think I heard of it a couple of years beforehand. I actually got my greedy little hands on it. The premise simply was, hey, you like these books like The Lord of the Rings? Well, you can be one of those guys. That was it. That's cool enough. I get to play somebody in a fantasy world, and we get to make stuff up. Cool. So and that was enough to roll on for a long time, and it still floats my boat. However, um, there's other things that grab me. And it's funny. The whole idea of a premise really predates role playing games for me. By years and years. It was whatever book I was going to be interested in, or whatever movie or TV show, or what have you. It had to have some kind of hook or premise or something that made it different and unusual and compelling. And what works for me may not work for you. Um, as time's going on, a lot of those things tend to kind of be the same sort of things that attract me to role-playing games. I am not huge on setting. Like setting's okay. I'm not not against setting. However, setting takes a backseat to a premise for me. A good premise to me is worth its weight in gold. And the execution, especially in a book or a movie, can take a backseat. I like a good execution, but anybody that's a Lovecraft fan can get this. And if you're a super Lovecraft fan, you may want to throw rocks at me, but I don't mean any harm. But great premise, like unbelievable, like holy crap, how sick do you have to be to come up with that? Execution, he was not the best writer in the entire world, but it didn't matter because the premise was outstanding and just grabbed you and kept you up at night. It was so twisted and compelling, and that's what has drawn me to different premises. Have drawn me to like movies or ideas. Like, I thought The Matrix was cool. It's just a neat premise. And that just that's one of those things that makes you think about it afterwards. Like, what if that were true? Like, what other things could happen in that? So, as I'm looking around at different games, the premise is what has grabbed me for the most part. And it could be something like when I look at All for One, or I'm like, okay, Musketeers, I don't know. Oh, Musketeers and like the horrors of the night and werewolves and vampires and other fellow creatures. Oh, okay, that's starting to sound cool. All those ubiquity powered games, the real thing. Without going into the system, because that's another video. The once I got this idea that they were kind of cinematic and pulpy and a little bit larger than life and had that kind of like Indiana Jones vibe, if you know what I mean. That little pulp vibe. I don't have the words for it, but it had that feel. I'm like, oh, okay, that's kind of cool. And then throw in something like Hollow Earth Expedition, where you've got, it's not just Raiders of the Lost Ark. It's like, but Journey to the Center of the Earth with dinosaurs, and okay, that's starting to sound cooler. Um, then some of the other games that I've been, looking at lately. I mean, the whole idea of broken rooms, where you've got these parallel universes. That, I saw I heard of the game a couple times, and I remember seeing it on our Shelves of Shame and Hope, that little series that came around recently, inspired by Same Old G, and Ruslinger had that game on his shelf. I'm thinking, I've heard of that. I know I've heard it before, and so I go online. I look for a review of it, like a written review. I don't get to the review part. I just get to like what the game is about, or like what's going on in the game, and I'm like, uh-oh, I'm in trouble, because the premise grabbed me. The whole idea of these um, parallel realities, 13 of them, and just what's going on, and the whole. I was like, oh, that's cool. That suckered me in, and it was a premise, even more in the setting, that really kind of has my gears turning, because that just has my mind thinking. And so there's another game Robert the narrator talked about, which I've downloaded a PDF of it. I haven't ever actually bought the book, and I'm not sure whether it'll be a game for me or not. There's some things, but Eclipse Phase, the whole premise of transhumanism and the idea that it's kind of post-apocalyptic, but not just post-apocalyptic, because post-apocalyptic is a dime a dozen. But the whole idea of having your personality being this ego that's digitized, and you can re-sleeve yourself with different morphs or bodies, and you have this cortical stack, this little piece of hardware in the back of your head, and if that gets saved, then you get a full upload, and if it doesn't, well, you're only as good as your last backup, and that might have been years ago, depending on the game. So you may be wondering what's going on. That's a premise. I think I even mentioned a video about Tetsubo 57 put out a while ago now, talking about, I think it was like implant failure, and it's the same basic idea where you have you get re-uploaded into your next body, but it went all the way back to like when you were 18 and first copied yourself. So 200 years has gone by. So what happens now? I was like, I wanted to play that game. It wasn't even a game; it was an idea. It was a premise, and it grabbed me. So that's what's really drawn me as I'm looking from game to game. It's that. It's not just a setting. It's not just that, it's sci-fi or it's post-apocalyptic, or it's low fantasy, swords and sorcery, or it's like, well, what else? What makes it really special? I guess low fantasy, swords and sorcery is okay. Who doesn't want to play Conan? But other games, it's just something about it that grabs me. It doesn't have to be just generic, but there's some little twist that gets me. And so if the premise grabs me, then I'm going to give it another look. So what about you? Is the premise important to you, or does it take a backseat to something else? I will talk more about my other strange attractors, different videos. Have a good one.